Product mix decisions when capacity constraints exist. Now, today we are going to look at the concept of limiting factors. Now, in the short term, sometimes you find that the sales demand may be in excess of the current productive capacity. For example, output may be restricted by a shortage of skilled labor, materials may be limited, equipment or space, all these can be restricted, or all these can be limiting factors. Now, when the sales demand is in excess of the company's productive capacity, the resources that are responsible for limiting the output should always be identified. These scarce resources are known as limiting factors. Therefore, a limiting factor is a scarce resource which is in short supply. Now, within a short-term time period, it is unlikely that the constraints can be removed and additional resources acquired. So where limiting factors apply, profit is always maximized when the greatest possible contribution to profit is obtained each time the scarce or limiting factor is used. So when it comes to such a situation, we use the concept of limiting factor analysis. So this is a technique which will maximize contribution for an organization by allocating the scarce resources that exists to producing those goods or services that earn the highest contribution per unit of the scarce resource available. I have two practical applications here, which I'm going to use to show you how to apply the concept of limiting factor analysis, how we can come up with a product mix using limiting factor analysis. But before we go into that, you need to know some of the examples of limiting factors. There can be shortage of materials, so materials can be a limiting factor, shortage of labor hours, shortage of machine hours, as well as shortage of money. All these can be limiting factors. Now, before we go into the practical applications, there are some steps which you need to learn or which you need to understand, because these are the steps which you have to follow when it comes to coming up with a product mix where capacity constraints exist. The first step always is to work out the contribution per unit. So step one, we have to calculate the contribution per unit for each product produced. Calculate the contribution per unit for each product produced. You should be knowing how to calculate contribution. Contribution equals to contribution per unit equals to the selling price minus the variable cost per unit. Minus the variable cost per unit. So that's the formula which you need to learn, and it will help you to come up with your contribution per unit. So that is the first step when it comes to situations whereby you have to come up with a product mix where capacity constraints exist. If the contribution has been given to you, then fine, don't calculate the contribution. But where it's not given, then you'll have to calculate that contribution. So that is the first step. Determine the contribution per unit for each product produced. Then after coming up with the contribution per unit, step two In step 2, we have to divide the contribution per unit. Divide the contribution per unit for each product. Divide the contribution per unit for each product by the quantity of scarce resource. By the quantity of scarce resource required to make it. Required to make it. So we have to find out the resources, the quantity of the scarce resource that is required to make a unit of each product. So we get our contribution. When we do that, we get the contribution per unit. Contribution per unit of scarce resource. Contribution per unit of scarce resource. For each product. That's what we are computing here. And I've told you that this equals to the contribution per unit. The contribution per unit for each product. Contribution per unit for each product. Divide by, we have to divide this by the quantity of the scarce resource. By the quantity of the scarce resource required to make it. That will be our step 2. Then step 3, of course. Step 3 is to rank the different products in order. Rank the different products in order of how much. Rank the different products in order of how much contribution they earn. Of how much contribution they earn per unit of scarce resource. In order of how much contribution they earn per unit of a scarce resource. Now, after ranking, we produce first the products that earn. Produce first the products that earn the highest contribution. That earn the highest contribution per unit of the limiting factor. Per unit of the limiting factor or the scarce resource. Per unit of the limiting factor or the scarce resource. Subject to the constraint. Subject to the constraint of maximum demand. Subject to the constraint of maximum demand. So these are the steps which we have to follow when it comes to the application of the limiting factor analysis, and we apply that approach whenever we have a limiting factor, and we want to come up with the product mix. Now I'm going to take you to the illustrations, to the practical illustrations I have. Then I show you, we illustrate how we can come up with a product mix decisions where capacity constraints exist. You need to learn this because it may be examined, and of course it features in most of the accounting papers, management, accounting, cost and management accounting for CPA students. You need to learn this, as well as management decision and control paper 10. So the first illustration, our illustration 1, we have been told that a company is able to produce 4 products. Company is able to produce 4 products, and it's planning its product mix for the next period. Estimated cost, sales and production data are given below. So we have 4 products, W, X, Y, and Z. We have the selling price. We have the variable cost per unit of each product, where they have given us labor. So we have labor. Each labor hour is shillings 6. So you see how much they incur on labor to make a unit of a product. Then we have materials. We have the contribution. Of course, the contribution has been computed here. Contribution is selling price minus the variable cost. So we have our contribution. Then we also have the resources per unit, where we have the labor hours. They are giving you the labor hours required to make a unit of each product. Then they are also giving us materials in programs, which are required to make a unit of each product. We have the maximum demand in units. For product W, we need to produce 5,000 units because that's the demand. Then X 5,000, Y 5,000, as well as Z 5,000 units. So that is our information. What are we required to do in this case? Based on the above data, what is the most appropriate mix under the following 2 assumptions? If labor hours are limited to 50,000 hours in the period, or if material is limited to 110,000 kilograms in a period. So here we have 2 scenarios, and in each scenario, or under each assumption, you're required to come up with the most appropriate mix. I'll first look at labor, thereafter we'll look at the materials. So we already have our information on the first page of the question of the handout. So let us see how we can deal with the first assumption, where labor hours are limited to 50,000 units, 50,000 hours in a period. So assumption 1, labor hours are limited to 50,000 hours in period. So this is the first this is our first assumption. And now remember, we need the contribution per unit for the products, and we already have that. So for the products, we have W, we have X, Y, and Z. These are the products which we have, the 4 different products given the question. So we have those products. We have the contributions. We have the contribution per unit already. where for product W we have 8. Remember, contribution is selling price minus the variable cost. So here we have 8. Here we also have 8. We have a 16 and a 14. I'm getting these contributions from our question here. As you can see, the contribution is 8, 8, 16, and then 14. So we have the contributions. Now, after getting the contributions, we have to get the contribution per labor hour. We have to get the contribution per labor hour. We have to get the contributions per labor hour. And how do we get these contributions per labor hour? We already know that to get the contribution per labor hour, we have our formula that we have to get the contribution per unit of each product over the units of a scarce resource that are required to make a unit of product. They have given us the resources per unit. So to get the contribution per labor hour, I'll get the 8. Then we divide by 3. Why? Because we need 3 labor hours to make a unit of product W. Then here I'll get 8 divided by 2. We need 2 labor hours to make a unit of product X. Then here we have 16. Then we divide by hours required. Those are 7 hours. Then here it's 14, but we need 5 hours. Those resources per unit, please, you can check them out in the question. They are here: 3, 2, 7, and then 5. So now you will get the contribution per labor hour. Let us get our contributions per labor hour. 8 divided by 3, this is around shillings 2.67. 8 divided by 2, this is shillings 4. Then 16 divided by 7, this is shillings how much? 16 divided by 7, this is 2.29, according to my calculator. Yeah, 14 divided by 5, this gives us 2.8. So those are the contributions per labor hour. After getting the contributions per labor hour, now you have to rank. You have to rank. When you're ranking, you give the first position to that product which has the highest contribution per unit of the scarce resource, which is labor hours in this case. So if I'm to rank, I'll rank product X. This will be my first priority because it has the highest contribution per labor hour. Then followed by product Z, followed by product W. Then lastly, we can look at product Y. So that is how we rank. You rank basing on the most profitable product, that product which gives you the maximum contribution per unit of labor hour or per labor hour. So that is our ranking. That is our ranking. So I have this now. Now we need to see what to do next. Now, after the ranking, we need to know the labor hours required to meet the demand. Labor hours required to meet the demand. Remember, for each product, we have to produce 5,000 units, okay? So for product W, we have to produce 5,000 units, but as you see, each unit of W, we need 3 hours to produce that. Then X, we have to produce 5,000 because that's the demand, but then each unit of X requires 2 hours. Then for Y, still to produce 5,000 according to the demand, but each unit requires 7 hours. Then for Z, still we have to produce 5,000 according to the demand, but then each unit requires 5 hours. When you do the math, of course, you'll see that we have 85,000 hours required. We have 85,000 hours required. But now the question is, do we have these hours? Let's try to go back and check and see if these hours are available. If based on the above data, what is the most appropriate mix and the following assumptions? If labor hours are limited to 10,000 hours in a period, the truth is we don't have the 85,000 hours. The only hours we have are 50,000 hours. The labor hours required are 85,000, but only 50,000 hours are available. So what do we do? Of course, now we have to manufacture the products in order of attractiveness related to the labor hours. So we have to first produce X, then we produce Z, produce W, and then finally we can produce Y. So I can say that the company should produce, in brackets, this is your product mix. Should produce what? The company should produce, remember we have to produce following the attractiveness related to the labor hours, where we have the maximum contribution, that's the product we have to first produce. So we're going to produce the 5,000 units of product X. But to produce these 5,000 units of product X, remember each unit of X takes 2 hours. Each unit of X takes 2 hours. So you're going to use 10,000 labor hours. Okay. Then this will be followed by product Z. We have to produce 5,000 of product Z using, remember product Z, each unit requires 5 hours. So here we shall use 25. That is 5,000 times the 5 hours. Using 25,000 labor hours. Of course, this will be followed by product W. So far, this is 10, 25. That is 35. But remember, our labor hours are limited to only 50,000 labor hours. So we have some extra 15,000 hours. So using 15,000 labor hours, because now that is our balance, the unused hours so far. After producing X and Z, we have some more 15,000 hours unused. We have to use these hours to produce product what? What is the third product in ranking? That is product W. So this should be 50. So each unit of product W requires how many hours? It requires 3. So meaning that 3 times 5,000, it will give us 15,000 labor hours. So we have to produce the 5,000 units of product W using 15,000 labor hours, and of course, and no units of Y. And no units of Y, okay, which uses the 50,000 labor hours. So that is our product mix. We are going to produce 5,000 units. This company should produce the 5,000 units of product X. We produce 5,000 units of product Z, and then 5,000 units of product W. For Y, they should not produce because we don't have the labor hours. Remember, our labor hours are only restricted to 50,000 labor hours. So that is assumption A, where we have the labor hours restriction. Now, assumption B, let us try to look at assumption B, where now the materials are the limiting factor. Assumption B, where the materials are the limiting factor. Assumption B, where the materials are now the limiting, where the materials now the limiting factor. Where the materials are now the limiting factor. Let us see how to deal with the materials. The steps will be the same. These rankings will have to change because now we have a different scarce resource. So now this is assumption 2. Assumption 2, where now materials are limited to 110,000 kilograms in the period. Are limited to 110,000 kilograms in the period. So yeah, that is the case. Still, you have to come up with your contribution per unit, which we already have. After getting the contribution per unit, you have to get the contribution per unit of the scarce resource. So we have to get the contribution per kilogram of materials, per kilogram of material. Where we have to get the contribution per unit, we divide by the kilograms of materials required to make each unit of a product. So in this case, this will equal to 8 divided by, we need to check the kilograms of materials required to make each unit of the product. There, that is 6, 18, 10, and then 12. So this will be 8 divided by 6. What was the contribution here? It was 8. So this will be 8 divided by, we need 18 kilograms to make a unit of X. Then Y, it is 16 divided by 10 kgs. Then this is 14 divided by 12 kilograms. So this gives us the contributions per kilogram. For W, we have 1.33. 1.33. Then for X, we have 8 divided by 18. This is shillings 0.44. Shillings 0.44. Then for Y, it is shillings. For 16 divided by 10, this is 1.6. Then 14 divided by 12, this is 1.17. Okay, yeah, 1.17. Now you have to rank. Remember, we give the first priority to that product which has the maximum contribution per kilogram of material. And in this case, that will be product Y. So I'll rank product Y first, followed by W, followed by Z. This is third. Then lastly, we can look at product X. So this is ranked fourth. That is ranked fourth. So it's Y first, W second, Z third, and then finally X. So how many kilograms of materials do we need to produce the units required? So materials required to meet demand. Materials required to meet demand. We need how many kilograms of materials to meet the sales demand of each product? Let's try to find out this. Of course, we are told that for product W, we have to produce, okay, the demand is 5,000, but each unit of W requires 60 kilograms of the material. Then we have to produce X. The demand is 5,000 too, but each unit of X requires 18. Then we also have to produce Y, but each unit of Y requires 10. Then finally plus the 5,000 units of Z, and each unit requires 12. We need to find out the kilograms required to meet this production demand. Let's try to find out what we need and we'll see if it is available or not. So 5,000 times 6, that is 30. 5,000 times, here we need 30. Then 5,000 times 18, this is 90. Then this will be 50. Then 5,000 times 12, this will be 60. Do we have all these kilograms? No, don't have them. So 30,000 plus 90 plus 50 plus 60. Oh my God, we need 230,000 kgs. We don't have them because our restriction is only, the materials are restricted only to 110,000 kgs. So materials in this case will be a limiting factor. So we don't have these kilograms of materials. We don't have them. So what we have to do, we have to come up with our product mix when the materials are the limiting factor. That's the product mix. So the optimum product mix mix. Our first product produced is Y. So we advise this company to produce the 5,000 units of Y using the kilograms required to produce a unit of Y. Those are 18 kilograms. So meaning that for Y, 5,000 times 18, that gives us how many kilograms? That gives us For product Y, 5,000. No, we need 10. We need 5,000 times 10. That gives us 50,000. So we are going to use 50,000 kilograms of the material. Now this is followed by product W. Five times of W. Each unit of W requires 6. So 5,000 times 6, that is 30 kgs. So using 30 kilograms of the material. But remember, our kilograms are restricted. They are only limited to 110. Our kilograms are restricted to 110 kilograms. Don't forget that. So this is 110 kilograms of materials. So far we have used the 80. So we still have some 30,000 kgs of materials unused. And now we have to use these to produce the next product in ranking, and that is product Z. Now for product Z, of course, the maximum sales demand is 5,000. That's according to the question. And each unit of product Z, you will see that each unit of product Z requires 12 kilograms of the material. So we need 60,000 kilograms to meet the sales demand of 5,000 units of product Z. So we cannot produce the 5,000 units. Why? Because we don't have the 60,000 labor. We don't have the 60,000 kilograms of materials. We only have half of those kilograms. So meaning that we can only produce half of the units of product Z required. The demand is 5,000. So what we can produce is only 2,500 units of Z. How would we get these 2,500? To get this, you just need to show that, okay, I have 30 kilograms, but each kilogram, each unit of material Z requires how many? Each kilogram, each unit requires 12 kgs. If I get the 30,000 kilograms available, divide by the kilograms required to make a unit of Z, which are 12, we come up with the 2,500 units to produce the product Z. So that will be your product mix when materials is the limiting factor. When materials is the limiting factor. So in the above process of maximizing contribution per unit of the limiting factor, we can only use the limiting factor approach or the limiting factor analysis where there is a single binding constraint. In the first scenario, we assume that the materials was the limiting factor. In scenario 2, in the first scenario, we assume that labor hours is the limiting factor. Then in scenario 2, we have assumed that it is only the materials. Okay. So this is the approach to follow where we have a single limiting factor. Let us try to go through question 2, the second practical application. Then we'll see how we can still do this. Of course, it's different from the first one. So we also need to understand how to deal with this. Because for you to be on the safe side, you need to go through different scenarios because you never know what will be examined. So the examiner can try to trick the question. So we need to look at different scenarios and see. Let us look at scenario 2. Now we work as a trainee for a small management consultancy, which advises different clients. One of your consultancy's clients is a manufacturing company. One of your clients is a manufacturing company, Shortage Limited, um, Shortage Limited, which is experiencing problems in obtaining, supplies of a major component. The component is used in all of its 4 products, and there is a labor dispute at the supplier's factory, which is restricting the component's availability. Supplies will be restricted to 224 to 22,400 components for the next period, and the company wishes to ensure that the best use is made of the available components. The best use is made of the available components. Now, this is the only component used in the 4 products. And there are no alternatives and no other suppliers. The components cost shillings 2 each and are used in varying amounts in each of the 4 products. Shortage Limited's fixed costs amount to shillings 8,000 per period. They are giving us the fixed costs per period. No stocks are held of the finished goods or work in progress. The following information is available concerning the products. So we have some information that is available concerning the products, as we are going to see. So we have product A, product B, C, and D. You have the maximum demand for each product. We have the maximum demand for the products, product A, B, and C. 4,000 units, 2,500 units, 3,600, and then 2,750. Then you have the selling price per unit. You have the component costs, as well as the other variable costs. Required to prepare a recommended production schedule for the next period, which will maximize Shortage Limited's profits. Then Roman to calculate the profit that will be earned in the next period if your recommended production schedule is followed. So those are the requirements of the question. In part A or Roman 1, we are required to come up with a product mix for the next period, which will maximize profits. Then in part 2, we are required to calculate that profit that will be earned in the next period if we recommend the production schedule in Roman 1. What is the limiting factor in this case? The limiting factor is the components. Supplies will be restricted to 22,400 components for the next period. So components are the limiting factor in this case, and they're telling us that each component costs shillings 2. Now, the first thing which you have to do, part A, let's see how we can come up with a solution for this. So remember, for part A, to come up with a product mix, we say that the product should first be ranked. The product should first be ranked according to their contribution. According to their contribution, a component, according to their contribution, a component used. components. Remember components, that is our limiting factor. We say that step 1 is to determine the contribution per unit. Determine per unit of each product. We have to determine the contribution per unit of each product. That is our very first step. Determine the contribution per unit of each product. How many products do we have? We have product A. So we have A, B, C, and D. We are looking for a contribution. We need to get the selling price. And we have the selling price per unit of the products. We have been given that. That is 14, 12, 16, and 17. So we have the selling price per unit. This is 14, 12, 16, 17. Then we have to get the variable costs. We have to get the variable cost per unit. We have to get the variable cost per unit. How do we get the variable costs? They are telling us that we have the component costs, which is 4. We have 2, 6, and 18, and 8. Then you also have other variable costs. Let me just add up. 4 plus 7, that is 11. This is also 11. This is 12. This is 12. Let me just take the totals for the variable costs. We add the component costs and then the other, because the component is a direct material which is used to do production of these products, then plus the other variable costs. So here I have 11. This is also 11. This is 12. And then D is also 12. D is also 12. So now we can get our contribution per unit. Contribution per unit of each product. 14 minus 11, that is 3. Then B, 12 minus 11, that is 1. This is 1. Contribution. Then 12, 16 minus 12, here we have a 4. Then D, 13 minus 12, this is a 5. So that is the first step. Then step 2, we have to get the contribution. We have to get the contribution per component. We have to get the contribution per component. To get the contribution per component, we have to get the contribution per unit of each product. Then we divide by the number of components used. Number of components used per unit. Now, the number of components used per unit are not given in the question, like in the previous example. So it's you now to find out the number of components required for each unit of the product. That has not been given to you in question, and now it's you to find out that. But don't worry, just stay on. I'm going to show you how we can get the contribution, how we can get the number of components used per, unit. So when you try to look at the question, Uh, the number of components required per unit has not been given, but we can compute this. Let us see how we can get the number of components used per unit. To take you back briefly to the question, they are giving us the component cost, what they incur to make a unit of each product. We have the component cost. Product A it's 4, product B it's 2, product C it's 6, then product D it's 8. Those are the component costs. Then the other variable, sorry, we don't need the other variable cost. We have the component cost, but then how much is each component? Each component is shillings 2. Each component is shillings 2. So for you to get the number of components required per unit, you get the component cost divided by the cost per component, which is shillings 2. So for example, I'll get 4 divided by 2, 2 divided by 2, 6 by 2, then 8 by 2 to get the components required to make each unit of the product. So when you do that, of course, product A, for product A, you'll see that we need 2 components because it is 4 divided by 2. The cost is 4 to make a unit of A, but the cost of the component is 2. So it is 4 divided by 2, whereby you get 2 components. Then this is 2 by 2, 1 component. This is shillings 6 divided by 2. So here they used 3 components to make a unit of the product. Then for product D, we incur shillings 8 on components, and each unit is 2 of the component. So 8 divided by 2, that is 4. So meaning that after getting the number of components used per unit, then we can get the contribution per component. How do we get the contribution per component? To get the contribution per component, we get the contribution per unit divided by the number of components used to make a unit. So in this case, for product A, I'll get 3 divided by 2. 3 divided by 2, that is 1.5. Here we have 1.5. Then product B, it is 1 divided by 1, which is shillings 1 per component. Then 4 divided by 3, 4 divided by 3, that is 1.33 per component. That's the contribution per component. Then 5 divided by 4. This is shillings 1.25 per component. Of course, I'll have to rank now. I'll have to rank. Remember, we give the first priority, or we rank first that product that has the maximum contribution per component. That has the maximum contribution per component. So which product do we rank first? The product we rank first, of course, that will be product what? Which product has the maximum contribution per unit of the component? That is product A. So we rank product A. We rank it number 1. So this is our first product to produce. Of course, this will be followed by product what? By product 2, by product C. So we rank this the 3rd. Then product D. We rank this 2nd. Then product D. third. Then lastly, we can produce product B. So it is ranked 4th. Okay, it's ranked 4th. So now we can come up with a product mix. We can come up with a product mix, but don't forget that our components are only restricted to 22,400 components. So let's come up with a product mix. Product mix. Let us come up with our product mix. Product mix. So as I've told you, we should produce product A first. So produce product A, we saw that we have the maximum demand is 4,000. We have to produce 4,000 units for product A because it is ranked first using how many components? Using 8,000 components. Why 8,000? Because the number of components required per unit of product A, there are 2 components. Eh? So 4,000 of product A using 8,000 components. Using 8,000 components. Then the second product is product C. What is the demand for product C? Let's try to find out the demand for product C. That is 3,600 units. So produce 3,600 units of C using how many components? Each unit of C requires 3 components. So 3 times 3,600. 3 times 3,600, that gives us how many components to be used? That gives us 10. 800 components. That gives us 10, 800 components. Then the other products to produce, next is D. Using how many components? Remember the available components. We have 22. We have 22. We have 22,400 components. These are the components available. We have 22,400 components, but so far we have allocated the 8,000 to product A. Then product C has taken 800 of the components. So the unused components, we have 3,600 components. Those are the components which we have, the unused. Those are the components which we have unused. So we are going to allocate them to product D. So how many units can we produce for product D? Remember, each unit of product D takes 4 components. So 3,600 divided by 4, this gives you 900 units of D. So for product D, we are going to produce 900 units. Therefore, for product B, there is no any unit to be produced for product B because we don't have the components to produce product B. So this will be the product mix if this company is to maximize contribution as well as maximizing profits. Then part B of the question, Roman 2, this is Roman 2. Calculate the profit that will be earned in the next period if your recommended production schedule is followed. So if we follow our product mix in Roman 1, this is Roman 2. If we follow our product mix in Roman 2, then the profit to be earned the profit to be earned in the next period. Let us see the profit to be earned in the next period. Of course, to get the profits will equal to the contribution minus the fixed what? Minus the fixed costs. If you have to get that profit, you have to get the contribution minus the fixed costs. So I have my products here. I've said we are going to produce A, to produce C, and D. How many units? We are going to produce 4,000 units for A. We produce 3,600. We also produce 900 units. Okay. But of course, these products, we have their contributions per unit already. We have their contribution per unit. This is in shillings. Of course, I also get the total contribution. What is the contribution per unit of product A? Let's try to find out that. It's 3. Contribution for A, it's 3. Then the contribution for product C, the contribution for product C, that is 4. This is 4. Then the contribution for product D is 5. D is 5. Those are the contributions per unit of each product. Those are the contributions per unit of each product. So if I want to get the total contribution, I'll just multiply 4,000 times 3. That is 12,000. 3,600 times 4. That is 14,400. Then 900 times 5. That gives us for 500. So this gives us a total contribution of how much? Let's get the total contribution. Our total contribution is how much? Just need to add this. And then you get that total contribution. 12 plus 14,400 plus 4,500. This gives us 30,900. Then, of course, I'll list the fixed costs. I'll list the fixed costs. How much are the fixed costs for the period? Let's try to find out that from the question. The fixed cost, we have 8,000 per period. So I'll say fixed costs, we have 8,000. So here they have asked for the profit, unlike in the previous question where the profits were not required. But now here they require you to come up with the profits. You're required to determine the profits that will be earned from the product mix up. So 30,000, 3,900 minus 8,000, this gives you 22,900. So this will be the profit to be earned from the recommended product mix. That will be our profit to be earned. So that is limiting factor analysis, where a single limiting factor applies. There is part B of the question, which you can also try to look at briefly before I sign out. Let us also try to look at part B to see what it's all about. A drug company has initiated a research project which is intended to develop a new product. Expenditures to date on this particular research total to shillings 500,000. So the expenditures to date, in other words, that's what they have incurred so far. But it is now estimated that a further shillings 200,000 will need to be spent before the product can be marketed. Over the estimated life of the product, the profit potential has a net present value of shilling 350,000. You require to advise management whether they should continue or abandon the project. Support your conclusion with a numeric statement and state what kind of cost is the shillings 500,000. Now, when try to look at part B, they are trying to test your understanding when it comes to the concept of relevant cost. Remember, when we are making decisions, we need to consider only the relevant costs and the relevant revenues that affect the decision. Now, when you try to look at this information, you'll see that we have the research costs that were incurred. Now, these are sunk costs. The shillings 500, this is a sunk cost. I'm going to explain what a sunk cost is, but this is a sunk cost. Expenditures to date on this particular research total to shillings 500,000. So 500,000 has already been incurred. So this is a sunk cost. And of course, we cannot avoid this. It has already been incurred. So a sunk cost is irrelevant for decision-making purposes. So for the 500,000 shillings, this is irrelevant for decision-making purposes. However, the shillings 200,000 will need to be spent. Now, 200,000 is a relevant cost. It is a relevant cost because it's a future cost. Relevant costs are future costs that will be incurred, and these costs can be avoided if a particular course of action is not taken. So 200,000 is a relevant cost. Then over expected life of the product, the profit potential has a net present value of shillings 50,000. This is a future benefit. So it's relevant. I'll consider the 350,000, which is a relevant benefit, or what we call an incremental benefit. I'll compare it with the incremental cost of 200,000 to come up with a net benefit. So we have a net incremental benefit of around 150,000 from the new product if it is marketed. Therefore, being that it's a net incremental benefit, we should continue with the project. Yeah, we should continue with the project. If you have to put this in writing, just briefly, this is part B. Of course, I can say that shillings 500,000 is a sunk cost. Is a sunk cost and cannot be avoided. And cannot be avoided. Of course, those costs that cannot be avoided, those are irrelevant costs for decision-making purposes, okay? Yeah. You say it is therefore not a relevant cost. It is therefore not relevant cost. For decision-making purposes. is therefore not a relevant cost for decision-making purposes. Told you the project will be continued. The project should be continued because the incremental or the relevant benefits because the incremental or the relevant benefits exceed the incremental. Remember, relevant costs are incremental costs, exceed the incremental, so the relevant costs, i.e., I have my incremental benefits, that is the future NPV, which was given as 350,000. Then you also have the future cost to be incurred. The incremental costs, which is 200,000. Of course, when you compare the costs and the benefits, you see that we have a net incremental benefit of how much? Of 150,000. So the project should be continued. The company should continue the project because of the incremental relevant benefits, which exceeds the incremental relevant costs. So in the future, if this project is continued with, of course, the profits of the company will be increasing by shillings 150,000, keeping other factors constant. Thank you for watching. Thank you for learning with Senior Hannington. In my next videos, I'll show you how we can make or buy decisions when if we should drop a product or not, and then we shall also try to look at special pricing decisions. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share this video with those other students as long as they do management accounting, cost and management accounting at all levels, because this is a key topic in management accounting papers. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to share, to like, subscribe. And in case you have questions, please, you can share them in the comment section. I'll be able to see them and then answer them. Thank you. Bye-bye.